now we're going to put in place a mechanism for them to start either in the normal glycemic or the diabetic state. So to do this, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go over here to the right, and I know Jeff has defined aesthetics about the flow of left to right, up to down in diagrams. And I lack his keen sense of beauty in this regards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it to the left of this and hope he won't hold it forever against me. Okay? So we're we've dragged it over here, and now we're going to impose a branch. There's this branch construct. And the branch construct will divide people up between these two states, normal glycemic and diabetic. So I'm going to have this branch construct, and I'm going to have some of these people going to a diabetic state and some of these people going to a normal glycemic state. And so I'm dragging transitions in here, okay? Now, only one of these transitions can be the default, and without prejudice, we're going to make the defaults be the starting normoglycemic transition here, and we'll make the other one be contingent on a certain condition, starting diabetic. And what will that condition be? On what will that condition depend? Well, it will depend on a parameter, the value of a parameter passed to this person. Value of a parameter that's going to be passed to this person that will tell them in what state to start. Okay? Okay? So we're going to add to this person a parameter that will be called initial diabetes state. Okay? How did I get default and non-default? Sure. So for each of these transitions out of this branch, so let me rehearse what I did again, and I'll come to this. So I took the entry transition here and I dragged it to the left and I rearranged it. I then dragged in a branch here, and I hitched up two new transitions here, which I called starting normal glycemic and starting diabetic. Now, for each of them, by virtue of the fact that they are emanating from a branch, there's a choice as to whether they are the default. Can you see that, or is my head in the way?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so the other one's just the condition.
And the other is the condition. In this condition, I've just added an initial diabetes state here, which we're going to use to kind of determine through which pathway these people go.
And that's a parameter, is it?
It's a parameter. And we have not yet finished that logical chunk, so I'm going to now finish it. Are people comfortable with what's here so far?
Could you just do the last one, but how did you get the initial diabetes state?
I just dragged it in.
Okay.
I just dragged it in from the palette as a parameter. But I'm actually not done setting it up yet. I'm not yet done setting it up.
Just out of interest, just a practical issue, trying to actually move the arrow. I can't actually, with the second transition, are they both transitions? So how did you get the little dotted line?
The dotted indicates that it's the default.
Sorry?
The dotted line indicates it's the default transition.
So how do you get that?
You choose it here. You choose it when it's selected. So when this arrow is selected, you'll have a. So when you select the transition, there'll be a choice between the type of it. Is it a condition, based on a condition, or is it the default? The default is if all other conditions are false. And when you choose that, it automatically puts it in dotted. The other one will be based on a condition which we have not yet specified, but because we've not yet finished the logical chunk. Yes?
So I'll just bring up one of the issues here is that the transition was not connected to that little choice diamond.
Mm-hmm.
And
Then it doesn't have that choice.
That's important to know,
Yes.
that you have to have the transitions.
It has to be
correctly.
connected to this thing.
Yeah, and it's a super common thing to miss. I still do it sometimes, and I have to look funny at what my model is doing. But yeah, if something is like red or it's not lining up properly, just make sure that both ends of the arrow, when you select it, turn like an aqua or green color. That
Yeah.
just means everything's hooked up right.
Yeah, so they should be, both sides of these arrows, when you grab them, they should be this greenish color here, shown at the ends. Okay? Are people ready to complete this chunk in response to the question? Okay, so the final thing we should do here, to do this right, is we should go to the whole project, and we should do new option list, and we should say initial diabetes state with a capital I, and the two choices will be normoglycemic and diabetic. This is an option list we'll use to encode in what state will someone start.
Where's the option? Where am I finding the option?
And so let me rehearse that again. So you'd go here up to the whole project, you right click on it, you do new, and you do option list, and you say initial diabetes state, and this will be a choice between normoglycemic and diabetic. Okay? Are people okay with that? Okay, who wants me to do that again? Okay? So what we'll do is we'll right click on the entire project, we'll do new option list, and this is going to give us a way of naming some constants, naming some things that will allow us to specify in what state would someone start. It'll be initial, the name will be initial diabetes state, and they'll be either normoglycemic or they will be diabetic with a capital D and a capital N. Would anyone else like me to go through it again? Okay, are people okay with that? Okay, we're almost done. We're almost done. Okay, so just sort of completing the things at the individual level. Go back to person, and for initial diabetes state, do you think what's the existing type of that? Yeah, but what is it currently? By default, it's double. What should it be? Initial diabetes state, that option list. It'll be one of those two options in that option list. Initial diabetic state, yeah, diabetes state. Yeah. Does that make sense? It'll be one of those options. So what possible values does initial diabetes state hold? It holds possible values as given by this initial diabetes statehood, which is two things, normal glycemic and diabetic. Is that okay? Okay. Now, completing the loop for this transition over here, guess what the condition is going to be by which someone will go to diabetic? So this initial diabetes state, what possible values can this hold? Speak as if from a Greek chorus. What possible values will this hold? Or normal glycemic. So under what conditions would someone go initially into the diabetic state? Tell me the condition. Good. In other words, initial diabetes state, how would I test if it equals diabetic? Equals. Great. Diabetic. diabetic. There we go. The capital D. It's a thing of beauty, at least to my tired eyes. Okay, are people okay with that? Build early, build often. Hopefully it'll be a happy camper. If it's not, you could secure the help of someone here. Who would need help right now? Bit of help?
Just one question, Nate.
Yes.
Initial state, did you set a value for that yet?
No. No, we haven't set a value.
Okay, so we'll do that. Okay,
Yep.
good. Thank you.
And remember, when we say set a value, this default is only if we don't specify it elsewhere. We're not really setting it by specifying this word. We're just giving it a default if we don't set it elsewhere. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, where will this value of initial diabetes state actually be determined? In Maine, in what in Maine? Population. So, let's go up to Maine. Let's go down Maine. And I think Joe got that one. No one gets that internationally. Okay. I've said it in I don't know how many videos. I don't think anyone's ever laughed at it. That's an old New England say. You say we're going down Maine because it's downwind. It means sail to Maine. But no one ever gets it. Except Joe. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so we go down Maine. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to impose a distribution just to complete this thought. We're going to impose what sort of thing could we use to pick population members, so say 5% are diabetic. How do we do that initially? So that 5% are initially diabetic. What could we put into this? How have we done that before? If we wanted to impose a distribution on the initial population, what did we put in previously? A distribution. So we're going to drag in a custom distribution. This is going to be initial diabetes state distribution. Or you could say initial glycemic distribution. Maybe that's better. I don't know. I'll call it diabetes state. I have reservations either way. Initial diabetes state distribution. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted you to show this to you. And then this question gave me my in. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what sort of type will this be? You notice it presents in front of us 3 options for type. Which is the one we should choose? Options, darn right. Well spoken. In which option list? From which option list? Initial diabetes state. And let's make it so that normal glycemic, what would I put for number of observations? Well, you could put 95 and 5 for the other. You could put 0.95 and 0.05. But basically 95% of them are normal glycemic, 5% are diabetic. Okay, we're at the cusp of, I was going to say greatness, but it's at the cusp of completing the nugget, completing the chunk of work. Let us go now actually specify for people in the population what their initial diabetic state is. To where do we have to go? Whither must we go? We have to go to the population, and we have to go to where in the population? Initial diabetes state, and what do we have to do? Initial diabetes state distribution. And we have to call it just like that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, completes the thought. So let's trace this back in another way. Some of you may be confused. You're not seeing the forest for the trees. What hath we wrought? Let us review it, shall we not? Okay. Man, another few years I might be able to do this whole thing in poetry. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to retrace in a deliberately distinct logical order. Okay. We provided a way by creating this option list called initial diabetes state. We create a way of indicating whether we want to start a normal glycemic state or a diabetic state. We provided at person level a parameter whose type indicates it has to hold values that are either, that are from that choice, normal glycemic or diabetic. And this would generalize to choices with 10, 20, any number of different choices. You have an option list that holds those choices. You have a parameter which specifies what's your initial state in terms of those choices. We have a branch when we come into a state chart that divides us between different states according to the values of that parameter, with some defaults, all the others being dispatched according to particular values of that parameter. And then, to complete the thought, and in the coup de grace, we had a distribution for initial people amongst these possibilities and for the population in which they live. We drew from that distribution. Does that make sense? Are people comfortable with that? Yes, Joe.
Would another way be using the random true way?
You could do random true, but so the reason I didn't do that, I think a neuron fired on that front that, I could do that, but I decided against it because it's too hard-coded for the two choices. Because here there's only two, but I wanted to show a way that's generalizable to an arbitrary number of states. And if you had just two possible states, you could flip a coin. And it has a certain elegance to it, but it would have been leaving you folks bereft and adrift. Adrift in a sea of uncertainty as I fly back as to how to proceed with an arbitrary number. So I put in place an option list. And that option list it can generalize, and it permits us to sort of capture an arbitrary distribution of people amongst an arbitrary number of states. This is a very general approach, and to that gentleman in the back, I'm indebted for bringing this forward, because I think this is something to which I did justice in the pleasant confines of Adelaide. Okay, great. So may I record this nugget?